The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Well, hello. Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And it is Wednesday in the Riv. And,
Hump Day.
Hump Day, and the news is popping again. Fall River made the news again yesterday. I guess the Channel 12
Investigative reporters.
Investigative reporting broke a story. I think weren't they the ones that broke the story about the police chief?
Yep.
It was 12, yeah.
Yes, it was.
So I guess there's they've got an affinity. So
I guess they have a better investigative team than any of the other stations.
Yeah, it seems like they're doing a lot. They're doing a lot of work. So
and when you're doing a lot of investigation, you might as well set up an office in the city where it happens most.
Well, one thing about them is that they know, like we do, there's always a lot of news in Fall River.
That's
we
right.
Never run out of material to talk about, and sorry, I've got to.
So let's get right to what that's all about.
Yeah.
It appears that two police officers were found to be placing evidence in their desk drawers instead of checking them into an evidence locker. And that's not a good thing.
Yeah, the chain of custody is extremely important in trials, obviously, because any defense lawyer will, if the chain of custody is broken, they can indict the validity of the evidence. So it looks like there are going to be a lot of cases, according to that article. There are going to be a lot of drug convictions that are going to be looking to get overturned because of this. Because any investigation that the individuals are involved in, although I when I read that article, did you notice that they talked about the sergeant and the detective? Obviously, the guy must have been a detective sergeant, but because he was in Vice. But then there wasn't a lot of the rest of the article. Basically, was about the detective.
Right.
They didn't really mention the sergeant. And the way I looked at the article was that the sergeant had signed the evidence that was in the drawer. But so I don't know. See, that's the thing. The article wasn't really clear. It was very clear about the fact that there were going to be some issues about the chain of custody and that there were going to be some appeals. But it really didn't go into the fact that, because you don't like to assume anything in articles like that, because you should get the whole picture, as we always say.
Well,
and it was kind of like. They said that the sergeant signed the evidence bag, but then he had nothing to do with the rest of the stuff.
Right.
It was improperly placed in there by the detective. So, but it wasn't really clear. The article was kind of. Then you read it, and the rest of the entire article was about the detective having it in the drawer and all the cases that were going to be reviewed, and they're going to be very, very, very high amount.
Let's make it perfectly clear who we're talking about here. We're talking about two officers who are part of the Vice and Intelligence Unit, okay? And Chief Cardoza did name them, so I have no problem naming them here. It's Detective Joshua Robillard and Sergeant Louis Duart, okay? Both formerly of the Vice and Intelligence Unit.
Formerly.
The chief said Robillard was discovered improperly keeping confiscated drugs inside his desk instead of documenting and submitting them into an evidence locker. A portion of the drugs found in Robillard's desk had been tagged by Duart. That's the only thing they say about Duart.
Yeah.
We're not talking about one small bag, Cardoza said, about the evidence found in Robillard's desk. We're talking about multiple packages. That's a lot of drugs, depending on what size package they were.
Yeah, but still, multiple is a big. That's
exactly. Accordingly, Robillard has worked for the Vice unit for the last 8 years and was reassigned out of the unit to a non-investigatory assignment during the internal probe. Cardoza said the detective would begin serving an unpaid suspension this week, but declined to disclose how long. A message left with Robillard's union group was not immediately returned. Detective Robillard will not, as long as I am the chief of police here, will not ever be an investigative assignment. He will be assigned to in-house duties as long as I am chief. I have given him a lengthy and very lengthy suspension. Now, here's the problem I have. Isn't this a criminal act? Or am I just thinking that it is?
You know, it's obviously a violation of protocol. It's a violation of the of their duties to because it could let a guilty drug dealer go. And the other thing about that article is it said that he was supposedly using the drugs to give to informants.
Right.
And so that may be a criminal. That's the whole thing. The criminality of them. Is it sloppy police work or is it a criminal act? I don't think putting the drugs in his drawer was criminal. It was still in the custody of the police, but it wasn't the chain of custody where you could, somebody could tamper with that stuff was there. That might have been a violation, but I'm not sure about giving drugs to informants, if that's a criminal act. And that's the problem. It's just too bad. It's just too bad because you look at something like this and you say, well, people are doing the job every day. And when somebody does this and it's sloppy, the problem is he could never be back in an investigative role because anytime he ever went to court to testify, they would bring this up.
Correct.
Any decent defense attorney would turn around and say, aren't you the guy who mishandled drugs and had them in your drawer, and who knows if you put these in a drawer. So, his worth as an investigator is basically shot. His credibility is gone. And so it's stuff, and now what are they going to do with them? What are they going to do with them? Every arrest he ever makes is going to be suspect if there's evidence involved. And I don't know, it's difficult. And sometimes you wonder, and, all you can say is in this case, we got a newspaper article and both of those officers, and it appears as though Sergeant Duart isn't really, I think he just signed it, but it might've been a breach, but they're entitled to due process. The full story has to come out. And, but it was, on face value of what they said, it was pretty damning as far as the Robillard thing that, if he was in fact giving drugs to informants, I don't know about the criminality of that, but it is what it is. We know confidential informants are given money and given things like that. And let's face it, it's an integral part of police work. Informants basically are the reason they solve most of their cases.
Right.
Because that's the way, and that's what they do. So, it's just too bad because, look, we've got a city that's got a lot of crime, and they're out there every day, every single day, putting their life on a line in this city. And, we look at this, and thankfully this is the exception rather than the rule. Most of the police officers in this city are out there grinding it out every day, doing their job and dealing with a very, very difficult job in the first place, and in this era virtually impossible. And we have to put this in perspective that this is an exception rather than the rule.
I would hope so, yes. what I think is interesting is the internal investigation was headed by former Fall River Police Chief Jonathan Souza. So, I mean, there's a very credible man.
I assume that's Jack Souza.
Yep, Jack Souza.
Who I never knew his actual name was Jonathan. I thought
there you go.
So there you go. I learned something, even though I knew him for a very long time. When I had interactions with him, I never knew his first name was actually Jonathan. It was always Jack Souza.
Yeah.
So, everybody called him Jack. So I thought his name was like, John or something.
Right. Well, the thing is that they found, again, that the drugs had no paperwork other than those documented by Duarte. But here's was something that I thought was interesting. The chief was asked on why he decided to suspend rather than fire Robillard. Cardoza underscored that the detective admitted to mishandling the evidence, chalking it up to sloppy police work rather than nefarious actions. He said the investigation into Robillard is now closed. Quote, every decision I have made inside the building and outside the building have been second-guessed by people. It comes with the territory. A very lengthy suspension and an assignment inside was the best decision for the organization. That same statement seems to be made a lot. This is the best decision for the organization. We don't fire police officers. We don't hold them ultimately responsible. And let's be real. Some of these unpaid suspensions, if they have comp time coming to them, can't they use that money? Can't they use that money?
I don't think so.
Well, that's what I don't think so either.
Language. I don't think they can. Suspensions are suspensions, and but no, as you said, listen. Chief Cardoza took, and that's what he gets, that's what
he gets paid for.
He gets paid for. He made a decision. People can disagree with it. As he said, everything's always second guessed. Some people may think he should be terminated because, let's face it, how much, he's going to be on an inside desk job for the rest of his career. And when realistically, you can't put him back out on the street where the police officers are doing the work of stopping crime, so he's going to be a highly paid clerk. Is that
and how many $100,000 a year clerks does a city department already have, and how many more can we handle?
Yeah, but the thing is that you can always have a different opinions, and as Chief Cardoza said, but he took action, and he took. Especially in light of some of the other things we've seen in many departments where there's virtually nothing done. A very, very lengthy suspension, supposedly. I would have liked to seen the length of the suspension, but I guess they don't want to release that until the union goes through their, I'm sure that the union may attempt to appeal it and go to an arbitrator to try to shorten the length of the suspension. We remember many years ago, at least I do. You remember that was a police officer that was in Rhode Island that had been drinking on duty and got into an accident and was terminated, and they went to arbitration and he got his job back because the arbitrator felt that whatever they felt, but they presented a case. And as I said, the officer is entitled to due process. The union will do what it thinks is necessary, but I've got to give, Chief Cardoza credit for taking, decisive action. Some people may not agree with the action, but at least he took action, and it's good that it wasn't a slap on the wrist.
Exactly.
It was far more than a slap on the wrist, and I think that's what's really important.
Well, I think another thing that's important is the fact that this again happened under an administration which does not take the management of the city or the departments seriously and allows them to run themselves, which I think is a good thing in some respects. I think that department heads should have the ability to run their own departments. And I'm quite sure that Chief Cardoza ran this past the mayor. I mean, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm pretty sure because, I haven't known Chief Cardoza yet to not run things past the mayor unless the mayor's been unavailable. But it doesn't look good for your administration when you have a sexual predator, a hostile work environment. You have people making $500 purchases for coffee pots. You have now this incident in the police department. You have the fire department incident of the sexual harassment complaint in the fire department. This is all happening under Paul's watch. And while you can't control the actions of every individual in your administration, okay, the buck stops with you. Correct?
Oh, absolutely. I think that there's been a big, let's face it. This administration they never act. They run away from taking a leadership role, and there's no accountability. What you did touch on the department, but there was also a department head who testified in open court, in plain view, under oath, that he misappropriated funds, that he paid someone for doing work they didn't do in order to pay them off for something else. And that was brought up, and the mayor said, I'm waiting for the transcripts, which is kind of, but then, and I know that you checked, and according to the information you got, that there was never transcripts even requested.
Correct.
See, the key with leadership is that leaders have to, you have to, number one, hold people accountable. If you don't, this is what happens now, because you're sending a message. If you don't tell a department head that they have to run a tight ship, and if you allow a department head to do something that's illegal and basically do nothing about it, as you did with the superintendent of schools, and don't come out publicly, you just say, oh, I recuse myself, and so I'm not going to talk about it. Well, you recuse yourself as the ex officio chairman of the school committee because, number one, that's something you should have looked at prior to taking that office. You should have moved your brother somewhere where he wouldn't make you be able to recuse yourself. But you should have stepped up to the plate as the mayor and issued a statement that you think he should go and use the city's sexual harassment policy to suspend him immediately and end that hostile work environment. But that was not done. Just as when the DCM head said nothing was done. Now, now here's the parallel we can see. We have Chief Cardoza, who took action. Now, whether you agree or disagree with the action, he took action.
That's right.
There's a leader. Now, you may say, well, I think the guy should have been fired, blah, blah, blah. But he took action. He's a department head. Somebody in his department didn't do the right thing. And he said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And he did something. Where the mayor goes, well, I don't want to comment on it. I need the transcripts. I need everything to duck. That's the problem. Leaders are people who are put in that position to make decisions in critical situations that may not have a right or wrong answer, but there are going to be consequences for your actions. And that's what a leader has to do. As I said, I think on a previous show, if a police officer is going to a school shooting, you can't stand outside the school and wait for the rest of the damn chief officers to come there to have a consensus on what's being done. You have to you have to do something. You have to have even if you do something wrong, it's got to be an error of commission, not omission, doing nothing. Same thing at a fire. If you're at a fire and people are hanging out a window at 2:00 in the morning, you can't call up and say, hey, you want to call Chief so-and-so and Chief so-and-so and ask them what they think I should do right now. No, you have to, and the leader of a city has to be must be taking positions, especially when it's a department head, when a superintendent of schools is creating a hostile work environment and your inaction allows him to stay in that job for months and continue that toxic environment, you're not doing your job, in my opinion.
No.
When you allow a department head to misappropriate funds and don't send a message to that department head and every other department head that behavior will not be tolerated by the taxpayers that you represent in the city of Fall River, you're not doing your job. I'm sorry. You can duck all you want, but we just don't duck. As the samurai used to say, you got to take the arrows in the forehead because you got to stand there and face the issues. And this guy runs and hides all the time and uses some kind of excuse to duck it.
Well, let me tell you something. Greg Milliot, who is from the Bristol County District Attorney's Office, said, we'll have to handle the potential ramifications on a case-by-case basis. Or if a defense counsel wants to look back and file a motion, what's clearly appropriate. Now, here's the kicker. This name may sound familiar that's involved in this. Kevin Reddington.
Oh, buddy.
A longtime South Coast defense attorney who currently represents a man arrested by Robillard. No, we're not talking about Jason Correa. Said the development could deal a fatal blow to any case he was lead detective on. It does create a very, very heavy amount of baggage for the prosecutor. Fall River attorney Sarah Emery, who currently represents a handful of defendants arrested by the Vice Squad, declined to comment on how Robillard's mishandling of evidence might affect her legal strategy moving forward. But Emery said she was shocked by the news and expects the number of affected cases to increase as more people learn about it. I'd be surprised if it was only a dozen.
Yeah, well, you got to think that, Fall River has a vice and intelligence unit, but it's not a unit like New York City, where they have literally probably 100 people in that division because the city's so large, or maybe more. We have a fairly small unit, but we do have a unit. So the chances of him handling cases are obviously greater because there are not that many people to deal with these issues. So, and that's the thing, when a department head misappropriates funds, what happens there is the taxpayers are hurt, that activity. So, but this has, long, that's shows the importance of how the police department has to be run with the tight ship, because when things like this happen, they can go back retroactively. They can go back and open up cases. And that, let's look at the ramifications of this. There may be drug dealers back out on the street who were convicted because of this, And that's not only, it's bad for the community. These people are going to be back out on the streets. It's kind of like years ago when the guy got off after murdering 28 people in the McDonald's because the police officer, I believe it was in California, didn't Mirandize him properly, and the guy gets off on a technicality. Because the fact is that these drug dealers probably are guilty. Well,
right.
They were convicted, but now because of a technicality that the evidence chain was broken, there's doubt, and the court's going to the court may very well throw out a lot of these cases, and that's too bad. And I'm sure the most the person who's upset the most is Chief Cardoza. And so
let me say this, okay? Mayor Coogan did say something. Here's what he said. We don't want anyone there stepping outside the line, meaning in the police department. Whereas Cardoza said, I'm sorry it occurred, and obviously the buck stops with me. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure nothing like this happens again. Now, do you see the difference in the quotes?
There you go.
Can you see the difference in the leadership style? Now, Coogan applauds Chief Cardoza for his actions. As a matter of fact, Mayor Coogan appointed Cardoza roughly a year ago after the former chief stepped down because of the Target 12 investigation. And lauded the current chief for trying to clean up misconduct inside the department.
Yeah. Well, as you said, CJ, there is a difference between someone who actually understands how to lead and someone who's not a leader. Isn't it ironic that that statement, if you read it, it's, I don't want anybody with you, anybody, they are stepping outside the lines. The statement that, you know, his administration should have set a policy where nobody in any department steps outside the line, including the mayor's office when they violate ordinances.
Correct. So and that would have been leadership.
And there's a general statement rather than a specific statement. You look at a leader, he made a specific statement. You know, he made a specific statement. I'm sorry this happened, blah, you know, he took decisive action and okay. But now the mayor, again, reflects his own inability to think like a leader. He's always been part of a group. He was a vice principal, not a principal. He was always a worker bee, never a leader. So he doesn't know how to think like a leader. He doesn't have leadership skills, and he's proven that on numerous occasions. That statement is a generalization again. What is it? Read that one to me verbatim again about the stepping outside the line. I think he was very specific in that statement.
We don't want anyone there, meaning the police department, stepping outside the line.
Yeah, there you go. He even restricted it to the department, like, you know, that's the only department we have to worry about. Obviously, it's more of a concern in the police because it can make criminals get out of jail. But there should be nobody in any department stepping outside the lines. There should be nobody that misappropriates funds in the DCM. There should be nobody in the fire department committing sexual harassment or assault. There should be nobody in any department stepping out of the lines. And how do you make sure that doesn't happen? That you hold the department heads accountable for making sure that they don't step out of the line, off the lines or outside the line, and all their personnel doesn't. Otherwise, there are going to be consequences. But that's the problem. Leadership has consequences. A lengthy suspension. Lack of leadership has general statements.
And, you know, Fall River does deserve much better than just the laissez-faire type of leadership style. Okay? And I don't even know if I would classify this leadership style as laissez-faire. It's kind of difficult. I mean, how can you get respect from your employees or from your underlings when you don't have the respect of yourself to execute your job appropriately? And that's what that is. Because if you lack leadership skills, you should surround yourself immediately with people who will advise you to do what's right and not what's potentially right. So
no, that's right. And remember what Chief Cardoza said. There's the true mark of a leader, a man who's not afraid to make a decision. But remember what he said at the end. You know, people are gonna criticize me, but it comes with the territory.
Right.
The leader understands that criticism of decision making comes with the territory.
And as he said, the buck stops with him. Well, that's it for our show, everybody. I want to thank you for allowing us into your home. And, you know, keep watching, keep listening, and remember, stay safe, stay angry, and hold your politicians accountable. It's always great to be with you. We'll see you on Friday. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.